Donald Trump has just openly called for the Canadian Prime Minister to step down. This wasn't in a confidential conversation, not via secret diplomatic routes, not in a disclosed document, but during a televised press event seen by everyone globally. His precise statement was that Carney ought to step aside right away and allow a person who truly desires collaboration with the U.S. to assume control. Canada requires fresh governance. While Carney remains at the helm, America won't participate in diplomatic interactions with Canada. A current U.S. president has outright requested the ousting of the legitimately chosen head of a partner country. And Canada's reply wasn't restrained. It wasn't balanced. It wasn't calculated or fitting or tactical in the detached, logical manner that marked Carney's earlier actions. Canada struck back fiercely. In under 2 days, Canada's legislature approved a consensus declaration on national independence. All parties, all representatives, no opposing ballots. Canada halted every energy shipment to America. Petroleum, fuel, power, everything. Canada cut off official ties with America for the initial occasion in the 158-year span of their mutual ties. And 43 countries released official criticisms of Trump's request as an infringement on self-governing rule. Demanding Carney's departure didn't undermine Carney. It rendered him untouchable. But this is the phrase that will characterize this episode. 5 terms Carney uttered straight to the lens, aimed at the U.S. president, which now appear on all major headlines in free societies. I don't work for you. Once you learn what Trump mentioned privately, why lawmakers agreed without exception to support Carney, and what the full halt on energy supplies signifies for each American warming their residence this season, you'll grasp why this isn't merely the lowest point in U.S. Canada ties. It could be the lowest point in U.S. foreign policy records. Press subscribe since the repercussions from this are just starting. Allow me to guide you through precisely what Trump stated because the details are important. The phrasing is crucial, the context is vital, and what occurred off camera is even more significant than what was broadcast. Trump's open remark occurred amid a media session in the White House press area. He didn't answer a query, he offered it freely. He gazed at the camera and declared, "Canada requires new governance. Carney has proven catastrophic for Canada, catastrophic for the partnership, and honestly, catastrophic for the globe. He ought to step aside right away and permit someone who genuinely desires collaboration with America, someone who grasps who Canada's allies are, to assume control." He continued further, "While Carney stays in power, America won't interact diplomatically with Canada. We won't bargain with an individual who lacks respect for this nation and lacks respect for Americans." The wording is telling. Permit someone to assume control, as if Canadian governance belongs to America to designate someone who desires collaboration with America, as if the role of Canada's Prime Minister is to advance U.S. goals. While Carney stays in power, a clear condition, not linked to any policy shift, but to eliminating an individual. This wasn't a commerce request. This wasn't a policy clash. This was a current U.S. president openly stating that a Democratic partner's selected head should be ousted and substituted with someone more agreeable. Off camera, the influence extended further and more sinister. Accounts surfaced soon after that Trump had informed top advisors he aimed to shatter Carney in politics, his specific term, per 2 individuals present. His reasoning was basic, yet intentional. Sufficient financial strain paired with ample open disgrace would lead Carney's own group to abandon him, sparking a governance contest that would yield a fresh prime minister ready to agree to U.S. conditions. It was the reasoning of a business aggressor used on a free government. Spot the objective. Exert enough strain to fracture the leadership. Place agreeable executives. But the objective wasn't an enterprise. It was a nation, and the leadership was 38 million residents. The American envoy to Canada was apparently directed to convey to Canadian rival political connections that commerce standardization depends on a shift in Canadian governance. U.S. influencers in Ottawa contacted Canadian corporate heads indicating that a governance shift would release the financial aid that Canadian sectors urgently required. The open remark was the surface element. Underneath was an organized effort to unsettle Canadian freedom from within by economic force and political control aimed at substituting a head the U.S. deemed troublesome. Trump also suggested that financial strain would escalate until Canada obtains the governance it merits. Governance it merits. An overseas president determining who ought to guide Canada. The intent was clear. We will penalize your nation financially until your populace eliminates the head we dislike. That's not commerce strategy. That's not firm bargaining. That is financial force serving regime alteration aimed at a free society by a free society. This followed, naturally, 18 months of rising tension where Carney had repeatedly outsmarted Trump at each step. Carney declined commerce discussions. His retaliatory actions stunned economies. His spread-out approach lessened U.S. influence. His polar structure obstructed the Greenland scheme. His graft revelation shamed the regime worldwide. Trump's request seems like the irritation of an individual who has suffered defeats multiple times and has decided that the issue isn't his plan. It's the individual opposite. If you can't defeat them, eliminate them. That's not the reasoning of a free leader handling a free partner. That's the reasoning of a dictator handling a bothersome barrier. Now, permit me to clarify why this stands apart, essentially absolutely distinct from all prior elements in this dispute. Each earlier step in the U.S. Canada tension targeted Canadian concerns, commerce concerns, monetary concerns, energy concerns, land concerns, asset concerns. Those are grave. They inflict genuine harm, but they are fundamentally bargainable. Countries can withstand financial strain. They can adapt to duties. They can broaden commerce. They can discover fresh associates. Concerns can be yielded, exchanged, reorganized. This targets Canadian freedom, not Canada's commerce strategy, not Canada's monetary framework, Canada's entitlement to select its own head. That is not a bargainable concern. It is a vital tenet. When you target a nation's commerce strategy, you initiate a bargain. When you target a nation's entitlement to select its own head, you initiate a conflict. Perhaps not an armed conflict, but a conflict of tenets that has no yielded stance. You either protect your freedom or you yield it. There is no compromise. Global law specialists denounced the request in mere hours. The UN Charter's Article 2, Section 7 clearly bans meddling in the domestic matters of independent states. A Yale global law scholar termed it the clearest breach of the non-meddling tenet by a key free leader in the era after World War II. An ex-British external affairs head stated, "Not even amid the Cold War did a Western head openly request the departure of another Western head. This lacks precedent." A Georgetown scholar of global affairs framed it historically. America has a lengthy and disturbing record of influencing heads in Latin America, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia. But this marks the initial instance it has aimed regime alteration language at a G7 country, a NATO partner, and a Five Eyes data ally. This isn't the Cold War strategy. This is something fresh, and it's far riskier. NATO partners saw the consequences right away and responded with concern. If America influences Canada's prime minister to depart now, what prevents it from doing likewise to Germany's leader soon, to France's head next, to any partner head who opposes U.S. strategy? The example, if set, would basically alter the essence of each Western partnership. Each upcoming vote in each partner nation would bear an implicit query. Will Washington endorse the outcome? Will the individual we select be suitable to the U.S. president? Or will we encounter financial force until we pick someone more yielding? France's head released a declaration, soon calling the request an insult to each free tenet the Western partnership was created to protect. Germany's leader was just as straightforward. The independence of free votes is unyielding no matter the financial link between the countries involved. The UK's Prime Minister labeled it profoundly disturbing and completely intolerable among partners. That marks the conclusion of the partnership as an equal collaboration. That marks the start of the partnership as a dominion. And dominions don't possess partners, they possess subordinates. And this is the contradiction that Trump evidently never pondered. The contradiction that changed his boldest action into his gravest error in judgment. Earlier actions in the commerce conflict split Canadians somewhat. Some believed the duties were handleable and favored bargaining. Some doubted Carney's aggressive method. Some feared the spread-out plan was advancing too quickly. There were valid discussions throughout Canadian governance about the proper method to manage the link with America. Those discussions were beneficial. They were free, and they suggested that Canadian determination might fracture under sufficient strain, demanding the departure of their legitimately selected head terminated all those discussions instantly. It brought together the whole nation, all groups, all areas, all populations, all governance ideologies behind one tenet that no Canadian of any view could oppose. Canada's freedom is not open to U.S. endorsement. Carney's governance rivals, the conservative group heads who had devoted professions to overcoming him, who opposed his monetary strategies, who thought they could rule superior, promptly released declarations supporting his entitlement to lead, not supporting his strategies, not backing his method, supporting his entitlement to rule as the legitimately picked head of an independent country. Because now advocating for Carney to depart, something his rivals would typically do daily as part of standard free governance, would mean concurring with Trump. And no Canadian official in any group, in any region, in any composition can endure that connection. Trump attempted to diminish Carney. He turned him into the most politically protected head in the free world. Carney's support levels surged 20 points immediately. His rivals were quieted not by Carney, but by Trump. His authority was firmer than it had been since his election day. The request that was meant to shatter him rendered him unassailable. And then Carney replied, and for the first occasion in this whole tension, there was something altered in his manner. The venue was the House of Commons, all members of legislature there, the viewing areas filled, the country observing, Carney positioned at the stand. And for the first occasion in the chain of emergencies that had shaped his term, the detached logical accuracy that had defined his each open declaration was accompanied by something warmer, something more intimate, not rage, something profounder. The managed fervor of a person whose nation's freedom had been targeted and who comprehended the significance of what he was about to express. He addressed the Canadian populace first. I wish to address the citizens of Canada directly. You selected me. I lead at your discretion, and I will vacate this position when you determine I should vacate. Not one day earlier, and definitely not because an overseas administration requests it. His tone was stable but bore an emotional depth that countless Canadians had never witnessed from him previously. Your ballot is your expression. Your freedom is your legacy. It was constructed by eras who battled and gave so that Canadians, not overseas presidents, not overseas administrations, not overseas financial strain, would pick their own heads. That entitlement is holy, and no commerce disagreement, no duty, no financial menace will ever lead me to yield it. Then he pivoted, gazed straight into the lens, and his manner changed, still managed, but with a sharpness that pierced every display it touched, and to the President of America. I realize that the idea of free responsibility might be unknown in your present method to ruling, but permit me to describe how it functions in Canada. In Canada, heads are selected by residents. They lead at the discretion of those residents. They are responsible to those residents, not to overseas presidents, not to commerce menaces, not to financial force, not to requests given at media sessions. Pause. I don't work for you. Another pause. The room was totally quiet. I work for them. He motioned to the gathered members of legislature, and they work for the citizens of Canada. And the citizens of Canada, each one, possess the entitlement to pick their own administration without the endorsement, the allowance, or the meddling of any overseas authority. That entitlement predated your presidency. It will persist after your presidency, and it will never, under any situation, be open to bargaining. Then the caution expressed with the subdued conclusiveness that had become Carney's hallmark, but bearing a load of outcome that caused the space to alter. What you have performed today is not a bargaining method. It is a breach of the basic tenet of each freedom on earth. And Canada's reply will mirror the gravity of that breach, not the gravity of a commerce disagreement, the gravity of an attack on free ruling. The steps that ensue will be fitting not to any monetary complaint, but to the tenet being protected. And the tenet, the entitlement of a liberated populace to pick their own administration, is worth protecting with all this nation holds. The prolonged applause continued for more than 2 minutes. All representatives across divisions, political adversaries who had devoted professions to overcoming Carney were standing clapping the protection of the tenet that enables their own professions. In 10 minutes, "I don't work for you" was spreading worldwide. In an hour, it appeared on the main page of each key periodical in the free world. Global press termed it the 5 terms that reshaped a landmass. And then Canada struck back fiercely. The fierceness wasn't in the terms, it was in the steps. In under 48 hours, 4 steps were revealed that collectively formed the most crushing counteraction in the record of ties between partnered freedoms. First, the Canadian legislature approved an urgent independence and free autonomy declaration. The ballot was consensus. All groups, all representatives, 338 ballots to 0. The declaration officially stated that any overseas administration's effort to affect Canadian governance choice represents an act of antagonistic meddling in Canadian free independence and permits the administration to implement all required monetary, official, and protection steps in reply. A consensus legislative ballot in a multi-group freedom is nearly unprecedented. It occurs when something so basic is threatened that governance variances become unimportant. This was that instance. Second, the ultimate monetary choice, not balanced counteraction, not precise hits on politically vulnerable areas. A total halt of all energy shipments to America. Petroleum, natural fuel, power, hydroelectric energy, all of it. Not lowered, not restricted, halted completely. Canada provides 60% of America's raw oil imports, 98% of power imports in frontier regions. Those figures aren't concepts. They signify the warming fuel for countless residences in New England, the power driving New York City's underground transport, the natural fuel powering plants throughout the Midwest, the raw oil supplying processors from Texas to Louisiana to the Great Lakes. The halt was the monetary parallel of severing someone's airflow and stating, "Now clarify to me once more who should guide my nation." Beside the energy halt, a complete stop on vital mineral shipments, scarce earth components, nickel, cobalt, lithium, potash, severing U.S. protection firms, EV producers, and technology firms from resources they had presumed would circulate unrestricted eternally. The instant ending of all shared monetary initiatives and transborder structure endeavors, and one step that no one anticipated and that struck the U.S. economy in a manner no one had computed, the shutdown of Canadian skies to U.S. commercial flights heading to Europe and Asia. Almost all journeys from the eastern U.S. to Europe and numerous to Asia traverse Canadian skies. Redirecting those journeys south of Canadian land would increase hours of journey duration, consume billions in extra fuel, and generate successive postponements throughout each global center on the eastern coast. The flight sector projected the expense at over $3 billion yearly if continued. Third, the global assembly. Carney individually contacted each G7 head, each NATO head, each Commonwealth state leader. He asked for official global criticism. In under 48 hours, combined declarations came from the European Union, the United Kingdom, Australia, Japan, South Korea, and 34 Commonwealth countries. The declarations criticized any effort by one freedom to impose the governance of another and confirmed the unassailable entitlement of each country to select its own governance free from outside strain. The UN head issued an unusual open declaration strengthening the tenet of independent non-meddling. 43 countries overall released official criticisms. Trump didn't merely target Carney. He targeted a tenet that each freedom on earth relies on, and each freedom replied. Fourth, the official cutting. Canada officially cut official ties with America. Not a reduction, not a withdrawal, complete cutting. The Canadian delegation in Washington shut. Official staff returned home. Consular operations halted. For 158 years, through 2 global conflicts, the Cold War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, each emergency this landmass has ever encountered. Canada and America kept continuous official ties. That continuity concluded not over commerce, not over duties, not over energy or minerals or polar independence, over freedom, over the entitlement of an independent country to select its own head. Demanding his resignation isn't a commerce action. It isn't an official tactic. It's an assault on the free procedure that placed him in position. And when you assault a freedom's entitlement to select its own head, you don't diminish that head, you render them unassailable. Because now protecting the head is protecting freedom. Carney's governance rivals, the individuals who desire his role, who oppose his strategies, who believe they can perform superior, just balloted consensus 338-0 to safeguard his entitlement to rule. That doesn't occur in a multi-group freedom over commerce strategy. That occurs when something vital is threatened, and Trump just rendered it vital. The riskiest element in commerce or governance is to grant your rival ethical certainty. Prior to this request, Canada's reply was tactical, computed, logical, detached. Even Carney was executing chess actions, spread out, readjustment, repositioning, clever actions, successful actions, but detached ones motivated by computation, not belief. Now, Canada's reply is ethical. Canada isn't battling for commerce conditions anymore. It isn't battling for market entry or duty levels. It's battling for freedom, for the entitlement to select its own head. And people battle differently, with greater fervor, greater readiness to give, greater cohesion, greater intensity, greater persistence when they're battling for tenet than when they're battling for gain. A country battling for commerce yields will ultimately yield. A country battling for its free independence will never yield because there is nothing to yield on. I've observed firms attempt to oust CEOs of rivals through aggressive efforts, public strain, investor involvement, organized press assaults. It nearly never succeeds, and the cause is identical each time. The instant the outside effort becomes open, the leadership unites around the CEO from tenet. Even leadership members who secretly desired the CEO removed will protect them against external strain. Because permitting an outside power to decide your governance means yielding your autonomy. No leadership accepts that. No country accepts that. Outside meddling generates inside unity. It's the most dependable rule in human group conduct. And Trump just triggered it on a countrywide level. Trump desired to diminish Canada by targeting its head. Instead, he brought together Canada by targeting its freedom. Each dictator in records has committed this identical error in judgment, thinking that outside power can supersede inside validity. It can't. It never has, because validity doesn't stem from authority. It stems from agreement. And agreement, the agreement of the ruled, is stronger than any duty, any penalty, any military, and certainly stronger than any media session request that a head depart.